Okay, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're exploring some of the most unsettling and cryptic historical anomalies ever recorded. We're looking at a curated collection of 6 mysteries that, despite massive amounts of investigation, completely reject any standard logical explanation.
Think about that for a second. Humans naturally crave order, right? We want all the pieces of a puzzle to snap together perfectly. But there is a very specific, deeply unsettling feeling that hits us when we're confronted with facts, timelines, and witness testimonies that simply cannot be explained. Today, we are going to dig into the raw data behind these exact, impossible moments.
Part 1. The Bizarre and the Cryptic.
We're kicking our analysis off with some highly localized, wildly strange events that basically blur the line between hard reality and folklore. Our first data point takes us to the town of General Güemes, Argentina, in 2008. A guy named Jose Alvarez is hanging out with his friends. It's about 1 in the morning, and they're just shooting the breeze about a recent fishing trip. Jose pulls out his phone and is casually filming everyone joking around. But then, out of nowhere, this totally normal hangout gets completely derailed. They hear this super weird noise coming from the nearby grass. It sounds exactly like someone skipping or throwing stones.
They all look over, figuring it's probably just a stray dog. But the tall grass parts and out walks, well, it was described as a terrifying, gnome-like figure. The phone actually captured this creature on video, and the absolute sheer panic from the group is completely contagious. And the craziest part, this wasn't isolated to just that one night. Other locals started coming forward with their own sightings of this exact same gnome, throwing the entire town into a very real, lasting state of fear.
Moving right along to another hyper-localized yet totally baffling case, 1852. Bizarrely, this is the year a creature named Jeff claimed to have been born in New Delhi, India. But the actual events we're tracking here happened decades later, in September of 1931. The Irving family was living in a quiet farmhouse when they started dealing with some seriously intense auditory phenomena. It started out pretty normal, just persistent scratching and rustling behind the wooden wall panels. At first, you'd obviously think, okay, it's just a rat. But then the noises escalated. The unseen creature started making wildly different sounds. We're talking spinning around like a ferret, growling like a dog, and most horrifyingly, gurgling like a human baby. And then it started to speak. It introduced itself as Jeff, a mongoose. The daughter, Voiré Irving, was actually the only one to ever see him clearly, and she described a small, rat-sized creature with yellowish fur and a bushy tail.
What's truly fascinating is the actual dialogue from Jeff, as reported by the family. He claimed to be everything from an extra clever mongoose to a literal earthbound spirit. He famously told them, "I am a freak, I have hands and I have feet, and if he saw me, you would faint, you'd be petrified, mummified, turned into stone or a pillar of salt." And this wasn't just some passing rumor for attention. Voiré Irving maintained this was 100% real for her entire life. In fact, right up until she passed away in 2005, she gave interviews insisting that Jeff was absolutely not a hoax.
Part 2. Defying Physical Reality.
Let's move on to historical events where the physical evidence left behind totally contradicts the laws of physics. 100 miles. That is the massive, sheer scale of an anomaly that hit the Devon countryside on the night of February 9, 1855. After a light snowfall, thousands of hoof-like marks appeared overnight. These prints were small, maybe an inch or two wide, spaced exactly 8 inches apart. But it's the path they took that literally defies logic. For over 100 miles, they traveled in perfectly straight lines. They didn't go around obstacles, they went straight over them. These prints were found tracking over snow-covered roofs, up high walls, straight across rivers, and incredibly, they even tunneled directly through drain pipes as small as 4 inches across.
And the timeline of this mystery just proves how enduring it really is. Back in 1855, the panic was so intense that armed townspeople actually formed search parties to go hunt down whatever devil-like figure was responsible. Obviously, they found nothing. Then we have this massive century-and-a-half gap in time. Fast-forwarding to the night of March 12, 2009. Out of absolutely nowhere, the exact same strange marks, corresponding perfectly to the 1855 tracks, suddenly appeared all over Devon again.
Let's look at another one, from the 19th century, anchored by the number 20. This is the distance, in miles, of a challenge accepted by a man named James Worson on September 3, 1873. He had been bragging heavily about his running stamina, so he agreed to run a 20-mile race straight from Leamington to Coventry.
Worson was doing great. 2 of his buddies were trailing right behind him in a horse-drawn carriage, and one even had a camera.
They had visual contact the entire time. Warson kept turning around to chat with them as he jogged down the middle of the dirt road. Then, without any warning, Warson suddenly stumbles and pitches forward. As he falls, he lets out this incredibly short, piercing scream. His friend later described it with a chilling statement, saying, "It was the most ghastly sound either of us have ever heard."
Now, really picture this next part. As Warson pitched forward with that terrible cry, he didn't hit the dirt. He completely and totally vanished in midair before ever striking the ground. His friends jumped out and took pictures of the road to prove how impossible this was. Right there in the soft dirt, Warson's footprints clearly led down the middle of the road, showing exactly where he stumbled, and then nothing, just totally vanished. They called in search parties, but remarkably, even the local tracking bloodhounds were strangely terrified to go anywhere near the exact spot where he disappeared. James Warson was never seen or heard from again.
Part 3. Cries from the Void.
We're shifting focus now toward deeply unsettling human mysteries. Desperate, haunting cries for help, where the facts simply refuse to align. On August 7, 1973, CB radio users all over New Mexico started picking up a truly harrowing SOS. It was a little boy who said his name was Larry. He broadcasted that he was trapped inside a red and white pickup truck that had flipped over into a ravine, completely jamming both doors shut. Tragically, he said he was on a rabbit hunting trip with his dad, who had just suffered a massive heart attack, collapsed on the steering wheel, and died. Over the next few days, Larry's panicked cries faded in and out, bouncing between channels and reaching absolutely horrified listeners as far away as California, Wyoming, and Arizona.
But when we compare the extreme emotional trauma with the concrete evidence, things get so confusing. The sheer panic in this boy's voice was undeniably authentic to anyone who heard it. These transmissions were even picked up all the way up in Canada. Yet all the physical evidence completely contradicted the broadcast. A rescue helicopter searching the mountains actually made contact with a boy on a radio, but that boy said his name was David, not Larry. A missing family from Missouri who had a son named Larry was flagged by authorities, but they turned up perfectly safe a few days later. An Army sergeant actually spoke to the boy for 3 straight hours, but couldn't get a single usable address or phone number out of him. Eventually, the signal just died, likely from a dead car battery. Police officially called off the search, claiming it was a massive, cruel hoax due to lack of evidence. But listeners to this day will swear to you that those terrified cries were absolutely real.
Part 4. The Ultimate Cold Case.
For our final section, we are stepping far away from the paranormal to examine a very grounded, incredibly dark reality involving international espionage, false identities, and absolute secrecy. November 29, 1970. A man and his daughters are hiking in the remote Isdalen Valley in Norway when they make a grim discovery: the partially charred remains of a young woman. The crime scene was an immediate, baffling puzzle. She was surrounded by a bunch of sleeping pills and bottles of gasoline. Strikingly, every single tag had been meticulously cut out of the clothing she was wearing. Even more chillingly, her fingerprints had been completely sanded off. Dental screenings eventually revealed her dental work used techniques that were exclusively practiced in Latin America.
When police eventually tracked down her 2 suitcases stored at a train station in Bergen, the contents were just totally bizarre. On one hand, you have perfectly mundane stuff like 500 German marks, which is roughly $350 US. But right next to that, you have highly sinister clues: a prescription lotion bottle where the doctor's name was intentionally scraped off, and ominous pieces of broken glass carrying partial fingerprints.
Hidden under the lining of one of those suitcases, investigators realized her behavior was straight out of a spy thriller. She had been traveling by train all across Europe using 9 completely different fake names. She carried diaries filled with cryptic codes, which police later cracked, revealing they were logs of all the cities she had visited. Witnesses reported she spoke 4 languages flawlessly: French, German, English, and Dutch, and that she frequently wore different wigs as she traveled. And her hotel habits were equally unhinged. She would check in, swap rooms several times, demand a room with a balcony, and always order the exact same room service: just a bowl of porridge with milk.
But the absolute most disturbing detail in this whole case came from a local man who stepped forward much later. 5 days before the body was found, he was hiking and saw this very elegant woman dressed entirely inappropriately for such a rugged trail. He said her face was completely distorted with terror, and she actually attempted to mouth something to him. Right behind her, following closely, were 2 large men in heavy black coats. This hiker was so terrified he waited 32 years to go public with his story. Why? Because when he initially called the police, the officer on the line delivered its chilling directive. He told him, "Forget her, she was dispatched." The Isdal woman case remains completely unsolved to this day.
When we look back at the wildly different timelines and testimonies we've explored in this explainer, from a runner vanishing into thin air in the 1800s to a cryptic spy in 1970s Norway, we really have to look at them objectively. We aren't here to sensationalize or tell ghost stories, we are just here to present the data. And the data shows us that some mysteries simply endure forever, because that final, logical piece of the puzzle literally doesn't exist in the physical evidence.
So, here's the question I want to leave you with today. When the facts completely run out and the evidence straight up ignores the laws of physical logic, what are we actually looking at? Are these simply the world's most elaborate, generation-spanning hoaxes? Or are they terrifying glimpses into a reality we just don't fully understand yet? Keep questioning the evidence and never stop exploring the unknown.